Hello there, I'm Black Bright News and I want to talk about a subject I'm not familiar with. When I say not familiar with, I'm talking about Sunali Khatun, who's born in India, but she was deported to Bangladesh. She's very distraught about it and its implications, and I wanted to share those implications with you because I'm writing a book and I'm reading the chapters of that book with you. I'm reading them I'm creating videos across several platforms. So I'm using each platform for what I feel is appropriate. So this is about immigration, deportation. So I thought I would share it with you. Sonali Khatun said, "We are not from Bangladesh, we are Indian. Why did they do this to us?" At first, it might sound like a complaint, but what she was describing goes far deeper. She's a mother whose identity and the sense of security she provides to her children was suddenly questioned by the authorities. And when that happens, it isn't a simple legal matter. It has real consequences for the people involved, for the children and their daily lives. For a parent, identity is more than a passport or a form. It is the foundation you build for your children, the understanding of who they are, where they came from, and where they belong. Now, when the state challenges that, it is not just enforcing the law, it is shaking that foundation. It undermines the basic trust a parent works to create every day. And it forces a family to navigate a world where their reality is questioned. Some will hear the story and say, she was here illegally, she got deported, she even had a free flight, what's the problem? That is an understandable first reaction. On paper, the law applied, but in reality, it's different. Sunali Khatun provided documents, claimed her Indian nationality, and maintained her identity for decades. Yet the authorities treated her as Bangladeshi. The reasons for this are administrative, incomplete records, assumptions based on region, or the system assigning a nationality to make removal easier. In other words, she wasn't just deported, she was sent to a country she didn't recognise, a place with which she had no connection, and that made the situation far more complicated and stressful. This is not just a matter of one person's paperwork. There is a precedent in the Windrush generation. Many children brought to the UK decades ago had no formal paperwork. They grew up here, went to school, worked, raised families, and only decades later were asked to prove their status. Many could not because records were missing, their parents' lives had been under the radar, or they had worked in ways that did not generate official documentation. Some were sent to Jamaica, a country they barely knew, where they had no family or community. Their identities built over decades in Britain were suddenly challenged and treated as invalid. Sunali Khatun's experience reflects the same practical problem. Being sent to Bangladesh was not just inconvenient, it meant that her life experience, her family history, and her identity were all treated as secondary to administrative convenience. The flight, the plane seat, or the procedural enforcement does not address that. Deportation alone is difficult. Being sent somewhere you do not belong adds a further layer. Your truth and identity are ignored, and your children inherit uncertainty instead of security. This is why her question, "Why did they do this to us?" matters. It is not about complaining or moaning. It is about recognizing that the system failed to account for her lived experience. It failed to verify her story properly. It failed to understand the impact on her children. And those are practical, measurable consequences that anyone listening can understand. Identity here is not a philosophical concept. It is something that affects daily life, schooling, access to healthcare, legal status, family, stability. When a parent's identity is questioned, children experience instability. They are left unsure of where they belong. That is why the administrative errors and assumptions matter. That is why what seems like a minor bureaucratic decision can have profound, lasting consequences. It also highlights how laws and policies operate. Enforcement is not neutral. It interacts with lives in complex ways. When systems decide someone's nationality based on incomplete evidence and assign them to a country they do not recognize, it is not just a procedural act, it is an intervention into real lives, families, and communities. It disrupts the family-child relationship, it challenges stability, and it forces people to navigate a world where their story is not accepted. And while some may focus on the free flight or the fact she was removed, the larger question is about recognition, about the system seeing her as she is, about acknowledging the life she has lived and the children she has raised. Administrative enforcement does not erase the human impact. It cannot remove the anxiety, the confusion, or the practical difficulties that follow. That is why her reaction is not about entitlement, it's about facing a system that failed to reflect her reality. This is also about lessons that can be learned for policy, systems that demand proof decades after arrival or assign nationality based on incomplete information risk serious consequences. They create uncertainty where stability should exist and hardship where there should be clarity. Sunali Khatun's experience is one among many, showing the intersection of law, policy, and human lives, and the need to recognise the human element in any enforcement decision. Finally, her story illustrates a broader truth that identity and belonging are not abstract. They are practical. They shape daily life. They affect children's families and communities. When the state challenges identity or assigns nationality in ways that do not reflect lived experiences, it disrupts lives, undermines security, and leaves questions that are impossible to answer fully. So when she asks, why did they do that to us? She is not simply lamenting a flight or an enforcement decision. She is pointing to the gap between the system and reality. She's highlighting a failure in how laws and policies account for human experience. And she's asking us to recognise that administrative actions are never neutral. They have consequences, sometimes profound, sometimes lasting, that affect real people, real families, and real children. So I hope that may have resonated with some of you, help you to understand the situation a bit better. That's my job. You take care now.